At my sister's graduation, my own father, a powerful investment banker, looked directly at me and declared to his associates, "Isabella is the family's prized asset." As for me, after 12 years serving in the Royal Navy, he deemed me a squandered investment. He had absolutely no idea that this squandered investment was about to dismantle his entire empire of deception. My name is Isabella Morgan. I am 29 years old. For the past 12 years, I have served as an officer in the Royal Navy. On this particular afternoon, however, I was merely a ghost haunting my own sister's celebration. The early June sunshine across Oxford's ancient spires cast everything in golden light. The kind of flawless postcard perfection that university prospectuses plaster across their websites. Laughter floated through the air, effervescent and light, the sort of privileged, carefree laughter that only comes from those who have never known genuine hardship. Everything around me felt distant and cold and utterly grey. I stood alone beneath an ancient oak tree, clutching a glass of sparkling water as though it were keeping me tethered to reality. My simple navy suit and cream silk blouse appeared almost shabby against the sea of Savile Row tailoring and Harrods couture surrounding me. My mother, Margaret, swept past without slowing, her gaze lingering on me for precisely one moment. That moment contained everything. Disappointment, resignation, shame. She leaned in close, her voice like shattered glass. "For heaven's sake, Isabella," she whispered, her smile never faltering. "I transferred a generous sum into your account. You could have purchased something respectable from Rice. You make me feel as though we are concealing a family scandal." I said nothing. My grip tightened on the glass until my knuckles went white. I had become accustomed to being the blemish upon an otherwise immaculate family portrait, the disappointment, the aberration. I focused on my breathing instead. Inhale, exhale, the technique they had drilled into us. It had sustained me through years of relentless training. It was proving far less effective here. Then my father, Thomas Morgan, made his calculated entrance. He did not simply walk. He moved with the deliberate grace of a predator, a man navigating the intricate waters of power with practiced ease. A government minister flanked him, along with several prominent financiers, all flushed with sunshine and expensive champagne. Thomas placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder, his expression bursting with unmistakable pride as she stood radiant in her academic gown. "This is Sophie," he announced, his voice resonating with the confidence of a man unveiling something precious. "First-class honors, destined for a brilliant career in international finance. My daughter, the future." His eyes then found me, standing beneath the oak tree's shadow. The warmth evaporated instantly. It was replaced by something far colder, something infinitely more cutting. He delivered a short, dismissive laugh that traveled across the garden. "Every family maintains a portfolio of investments," he said to his assembled guests, ensuring his voice carried far enough for everyone to hear. "Sophie represents our blue-chip stock, a genuine gem, an absolutely sound investment." He paused, gesturing vaguely in my direction with his champagne flute, as though I were an afterthought, an embarrassment. "And Isabella, after 12 years in the Navy, well, let us be frank, she is a failed investment, a total loss." The laughter that followed was strained, but it remained laughter nonetheless. The sound felt like a physical assault, like a fist striking my chest and extracting all the oxygen from my lungs. My training activated automatically. My face became a mask, impassive, blank, forged through years of relentless discipline and sacrifice. I locked my gaze upon a distant stone spire, a sniper's technique for steadying the mind when reality begins to fracture. And that is when everything shifted. It began as a low thrumming sound, barely distinguishable from the breeze. But it intensified, growing louder, until it became an overwhelming roar that shattered the cultivated tranquility. The string quartet's classical performance screamed to a halt. Every head turned skyward. Everyone searched the impossibly blue sky, a grey Sea King helicopter, a Royal Navy transport aircraft, descended from the heavens like something from an action film. It was a brutal mechanical predator invading this sanctuary of refined privilege. The downwash from its rotors whipped across the garden like a miniature storm, sending graduation caps spiraling through the air, scattering napkins, causing a woman in an enormous fascinator to shriek and clamp it to her head. People scattered, their expensive shoes sinking into the manicured grass as they fled for shelter. The helicopter touched down on the main lawn with remarkable precision. Its side door slid open. 3 Royal Navy personnel in full combat fatigues emerged, their SA-80 rifles held at ready. They did not aim their weapons, but their presence alone was a statement. They established a secure perimeter. It was pure theatre, calculated, deliberate theatre. Then Commander James Whitfield emerged. He ignored the chaos entirely, striding across the grass with absolute purpose. He walked directly toward me. In front of my stunned family and hundreds of gawking guests, he executed a salute so sharp it could have drawn blood. "Commander Morgan," he called, his voice cutting through the mechanical noise. "We require you immediately." My father's jaw went slack. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Commander?" he stammered, the title sounding utterly foreign on his tongue. Whitfield's voice boomed over the diminishing engine noise. "Commander Isabella Morgan, Royal Navy Special Warfare Command. Your immediate presence is required." He turned and handed the university's dean an official-looking sealed envelope. Then he leaned close to my ear, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "This is serious, Commander," he said. "Meridian Capital Holdings. Your name appears on several equipment procurement contracts. Equipment that was never received. You are in considerable difficulty." I offered a single sharp nod. The initial shock crystallized into something else entirely. Something cold and hard and achingly familiar. Resolve. Absolute resolve. I turned my back on my frozen family. I did not look at my father's ashen face or my mother's expression of pure horror. I walked toward the waiting helicopter, each step steady and deliberate. I was leaving their world behind. I was stepping back into mine. A new war had just commenced. The Sea King's engines faded as we banked over the Thames, the glittering monuments of London shrinking below us. My cold resolve from the university grounds remained intact, a protective shell around the chaos churning internally. Meridian Capital Holdings. My name on fraudulent contracts, my father's shocked expression. The pieces formed a tangled, incomprehensible mess, but the emotions they unearthed were ancient and painfully recognizable. I had felt this particular form of betrayal before. Many times, as the helicopter carved toward Naval HQ in London, my mind slipped backward, pulling me into the past, into the memories that had constructed the foundation of my family's profound disappointment. I remember one Christmas Eve in our sprawling Kensington townhouse. An enormous Norwegian spruce stood sentinel in the living room, its branches touching the ornate ceiling, decorated with hand-blown glass ornaments and thousands of twinkling lights. It was a scene of magazine-worthy opulence. Everything screamed wealth. Everything screamed perfection. Sophie, 17 years old at the time, shrieked with pure delight as she unwrapped her gift. Car keys. A brand new metallic silver Mercedes. My father beamed, placing a hand on her shoulder with unmistakable pride. "An investment in your future at Oxford, darling," he had said, his voice thick with satisfaction. "The very best." My gift came next. I was 18. My acceptance letter to the Royal Naval Academy was clutched in my hands like a winning lottery ticket, the most significant achievement of my life to that point. My father retrieved a simple cream envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside was a cheque for £380. My mother, Margaret, leaned in, her smile as brittle as the ornaments adorning the tree. "For you to purchase a few things, dear. Something a touch more feminine, perhaps. They shall teach you to march at that academy. But I do sincerely hope you will not forget how to walk in proper heels." The words were delivered gently, but the underlying message was devastating. Their love was a transaction. Sophie's gift was an investment in her future. Mine was a consolation prize for having disappointed them so thoroughly. The cheque felt insubstantial and insulting in my hand, a stark contrast to the substantive weight of those car keys in Sophie's grip. The memories continued arriving, each one perfectly preserved, a specimen of their collective disapproval. I remember the day I informed them of my intention to pursue SBS training after completing my officer's commission. We were in my father's study, dark mahogany paneling, shelves lined with leather-bound volumes he had never actually read. He did not raise his voice. Yelling would have been too crude, too emotional, too messy. Instead, he reclined in his leather chair, steepled his fingers, and regarded me with the exact expression he reserved for underperforming investments. "Isabella," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I had hoped the Academy would eliminate these rebellious impulses. A daughter of Thomas Morgan does not require validation by enduring physical tribulation alongside individuals who possess no alternative options in life." He picked up a Waterford crystal paperweight from his desk, turning it over and over in his palm. There is no return on investment in such an endeavor. You are actively damaging the family reputation, our brand, our standing. The family brand. That was his terminology. Not my happiness, not my sense of duty, not my honor. A brand, a carefully constructed image of East Coast elite success, of Oxford degrees, of summers abroad, of impeccable social standing. My choice was a stain upon that brand. An act of sabotage he could not comprehend. To him, my desire to serve, to push myself beyond the limits of human endurance, was nothing more than foolish rebellion. The sting of that memory surfaced again when another arose unbidden. A charity gala at the Hurlingham Club. I was home on leave. My mother had insisted on my attendance. One must be visible, she had said. I wore a simple navy dress, the most formal garment I possessed that was not a uniform. One of my mother's acquaintances, a woman dripping in diamonds, asked what I did for employment. Before I could construct an answer, my mother swept in, her laughter like tinkling silver. "Oh, she performs work for the government," Margaret said, waving a dismissive hand. "Some tedious national security project. Frightfully boring, you understand." That was her description of operations in the Horn of Africa, of nights spent conducting maritime security missions in the Arabian Sea, of moments where my life and the lives of my personnel had hung by the thinnest thread imaginable. She was not protecting operational security. She was protecting her own social standing. She was profoundly ashamed that her daughter was a warrior rather than a socialite. In her universe, power was wielded in boardrooms and at dinner parties, with carefully chosen words and sharp financial dealings, not with a rifle. The helicopter descended with a gentle bump at Naval HQ. The wave of memories receded, leaving behind the cold sediment of present reality. I stepped out into the humid London air, the smell of the river filling my lungs. Commander Whitfield was waiting. Those old wounds no longer made me want to weep. They were scar tissue now, thick, impenetrable. I had spent my entire adult life constructing an identity entirely separate from their world. An identity forged through courage and sacrifice, through discipline and honor, not through accumulated wealth or social connections. And now the very name I had bled for had been dragged into their world of greed and deception. I looked at Whitfield, my voice completely steady, betraying none of the turbulence inside. "They took my name," I said quietly. "Now I am going to take everything back." My quest for truth was no longer simply about clearing my name. It was about answering a question that had haunted me for over a decade. A question burning far hotter now. Was the honor I had pursued even authentic, or was it merely another illusion? The past was a ghost. The present was a war room. The sensitive compartmented information facility beneath Naval HQ was a universe away from the manicured gardens of Oxford. Here there were no pretenses. Only data. Only truth. The air hummed with the low thrum of secure servers. It smelled of stale coffee and electrical systems. I was back in my element. The emotional turbulence of the preceding hours had been compartmentalized, locked away. I was no longer a daughter confronting family betrayal. I was an intelligence officer analyzing a threat, Commander Whitfield, and I worked in silence, our fingers moving across keyboards with purpose. The first discovery came up on his screen. His sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. He rotated his monitor toward me. "Commander, you need to observe this." There it was. A corporate credit line for £1.6 million opened at a bank in Windsor under the name Commander Isabella Morgan. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. Whitfield pointed at the timestamp. "April 12th, 2019, he said, his voice grim. "We have your official deployment logs. On that exact date, you were at a secure location in East Africa, preparing for operations in the Indian Ocean. You were theoretically off-grid, non-existent to the digital world." The air left my lungs. The enemy had not been on some distant battlefield. The enemy had been at home sipping expensive whiskey in his leather chair whilst I was dodging genuine threats on the other side of the world. The betrayal was breathtaking in its audacity, profoundly personal, almost elegant in its cruelty. "Keep searching," I instructed Whitfield, my voice flatter than I intended. "Examine my archived emails. Cross-reference any communication containing the keywords financial, authorization, or power of attorney with my father's name." Whitfield's search query ran for less than 60 seconds before flagging a single email. It was from my mother. The subject line was innocuous. "Helping Isabella." My blood ran cold. Whitfield brought it up on the main screen. I read it. Thomas, darling. Here is that power of attorney form Isabella left before her deployment. She mentioned she would be entirely off-grid for several months. You know how she is. Might you review this for her? She trusts you enormously. Love, Margaret. Attached was a document. Power of attorney. PDF format. I stared at that one line. She trusts you enormously. My trust. The uncomplicated daughterly trust that I had maintained despite years of emotional neglect and calculated indifference had been weaponized, had been wrapped up like a gift, and handed to the man who was now pointing it directly at my head. Whether through sheer naivety or deliberate ignorance, she had loaded the weapon and delivered it to my father. The IP address, I said, the words feeling like broken glass in my mouth. The one that uploaded the document for the credit application. Trace it. Whitfield's fingers flew across the keyboard. A map of the London metropolitan area filled the screen. A red dot pulsed ominously. It blinked over a neighbourhood in Kensington. I did not need to examine the street address. I already knew it intimately. That was the townhouse. The place where a grand piano I had been forbidden to learn sat gathering dust because I lacked sufficient aptitude. The house with the library where my father had lectured me endlessly on my life's profound failings. The house where I had been born. The house where I had been systematically told I was insufficient. My parents' house. The last remnants of shock evaporated, replaced by an ice-cold rage that travelled through my veins like liquid fire. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not an accident. This was a calculated, meticulously orchestrated operation conducted by someone who knew me intimately enough to exploit me completely. Bring up the PDF, I instructed. Whitfield opened the attachment from my mother's email. It was a durable power of attorney document, granting Thomas Morgan full, unrestricted legal authority to act on my behalf in all financial matters. At the bottom of the final page was my signature, Isabella M. Morgan. It was perfect. Too perfect. A flawless digital forgery almost certainly extracted from a scanned copy of my military identification records. He had weaponized my own career, the very thing he despised, and turned it into an instrument of betrayal. For a single terrifying instant, I felt a sensation I thought I had trained out of myself years ago during the brutal nights of SBS selection: helplessness. The overwhelming feeling of being completely and utterly outmaneuvered. Of having my own identity stolen and weaponized by the one person whose primary obligation was to protect me. But it lasted only a single second. Discipline is a muscle. 12 years of relentless training had made mine absolutely impenetrable. The helplessness burned away, consumed by pure, undiluted fury. I pushed back from the console. My chair scraped harshly against the floor. I stood up, my spine ramrod straight, my entire posture radiating cold purpose. The mission parameters had become crystalline. I turned to face Whitfield. His eyes were wide with concern, but I met his gaze with an expression he knew with absolute certainty. It was the look I got right before executing a complex operational breach. Commander Whitfield, I said, my voice sharp and cold as steel. Find me a barrister, a genuine predator, someone utterly unafraid of blood in the water, someone who has spent a career destroying powerful men. The address he provided was not in the city's gleaming financial districts. It was not in the prestigious legal corridors of the West End. Instead, it led me to Soho, to a narrow Georgian townhouse with a weathered brass plaque that simply read, Catherine Stone, Barrister at Law. The chambers on the first floor resembled a warrior's gym far more than a legal office. The air carried the scent of old paper and strong espresso. The walls displayed framed newspaper clippings. Headlines detailing victories against monolithic corporations, against entrenched government bureaucracies, against systems designed to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. This was not an office built to impress. This was a war room built for victory. Behind a large, cluttered desk sat Catherine Stone. She was a sharp, energetic woman in her mid-40s, a former Royal Military Police officer. A barrister who had dedicated her career to taking down powerful men who believed themselves untouchable. She did not stand when I entered. She did not offer a handshake. She simply observed me with intelligent, assessing eyes as I took the chair opposite her. Commander, she began, her voice crisp and entirely devoid of pleasantries. I have reviewed the preliminary materials Commander Whitfield transmitted. Let us be absolutely clear. This is not a typical family dispute regarding inheritance. This is financial warfare conducted against a commissioned officer of the Royal Navy. My question for you is straightforward. Are you genuinely prepared to launch a nuclear weapon directly into your own living room? I sat straighter, precisely as my training had taught me. I laid out the facts methodically, the credit line, the forged signature, the IP address. I presented everything with the dispassionate precision of a military briefing. I did not speak of the pain. I did not mention the years of quiet humiliation. I spoke only of data, evidence, facts. Catherine listened, her gaze never departing from my face. She nodded slowly, absorbing everything. When I finished, she leaned forward, and for the first time, something other than professional assessment flickered across her features. They view your service as an extended holiday, do they not? She said, the words hitting with genuine force. A convenient absence that permits them to conduct whatever activities they desire. They have no genuine comprehension that when you are off-grid, you are in circumstances where a single miscalculation results in death. The death of your personnel, of yourself. They do not respect it. They do not understand it. They view it as an inconvenience. I simply stared at her. For the first time in my entire existence, someone had articulated the fundamental wound I had carried in silence. Not with pity, with the clear-eyed understanding of a fellow warrior. With a shared language that nobody in my family could ever speak. A crack appeared in the armor I had worn for decades. Catherine turned her attention to the scanned power of attorney document on her monitor. Her demeanor shifted into that of a predator who has detected blood in the water. She enlarged the signature. This is a digital lift and paste. Competent but amateur if you possess the knowledge to recognize it, she said. She clicked through several screens, bringing up the file's metadata. But observe this, she pointed. The document was created using specialized editing software. A program certain defense contractors favor for creative accounting. A program explicitly forbidden on any military network. A slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator that has just tasted blood. Your father is not merely a criminal commander. He is a sloppy one. We possess him. This constitutes felony wire fraud. Multiple counts. This is prosecutable. This is devastating. After the meeting, Catherine walked me to an independent cafe down the street, a place with worn wooden floors and local artwork on the walls. She ordered 2 black coffees without asking what I preferred. Listen to me carefully, Isabella, she said, her tone serious. This conflict will become vicious. Your father is influential in London. He possesses substantial wealth and extensive connections. He will deploy both ruthlessly to destroy you. He will characterize you as an unstable officer, a disgruntled, ungrateful daughter. He will leak damaging stories. He will attempt to psychologically dismantle you. You must be prepared for this. I looked across the small table into the eyes of a woman who, like me, had witnessed the worst humanity possessed, and had refused to flinch. The doubt and isolation that had been my constant companions for years began to recede, replaced by something I had not felt in considerable time, hope. I possessed an ally. Ma'am, I replied, my voice calm and unwavering. I survived SBS Selection Week. I have conducted maritime operations in active conflict zones. I have made split-second decisions where wrong choices meant the deaths of people I loved. A courtroom is comparatively simple. Catherine's sharp features softened into genuine respect. Excellent, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. In that case, let us prosecute this war properly. The fragile hope I discovered in Catherine's chambers was a delicate thing. A solitary candle burning inside a hurricane. I comprehended the counter-offensive was approaching. In my professional world, when you identify a threat, you anticipate its movements. You predict its probable avenue of attack. I had braced myself for legal assaults, for corporate maneuvering, for financial warfare conducted through specialist lawyers and accountants. I simply did not anticipate the strike wrapped in the guise of maternal affection. I was in my temporary flat in Richmond, reviewing documents with Catherine over speakerphone. My mobile buzzed, the screen illuminated with a name I knew better than my own heartbeat, Mum. I held up a finger to the speakerphone, signaling Catherine to pause. Then I took a slow, deliberate breath. A tactical pause before engagement, I answered. Isabella, darling. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet. A tone she typically reserved for the wives of my father's most significant clients. It was warmth weaponized. I heard you returned to London. Why have you not contacted me? Your father and I have been absolutely frantic with worry. I felt that familiar bitter taste in the back of my throat. Worried about my well-being or Dad's investment portfolio? I asked, my own voice considerably colder than I intended. A sharp, wounded silence stretched across the line. So profound I could almost hear her recalculating her tactical approach, repositioning her attack. Then a wounded tremor entered her voice. A masterful performance. Isabella, please. We are a family. There have been some misunderstandings, certainly, but your father only ever wanted to protect you. Meet me for lunch, she insisted, her voice now pleading. Just us. The Ivy. My treat. I recognized it immediately as a trap. The Ivy on the Strand was my father's unofficial London office. A den of dark wood paneling, premium steaks, and backroom deals. Enemy territory. Every tactical instinct screamed at me to refuse, to maintain engagement on my terms exclusively. But a small, foolish component of me, a piece I genuinely believed I had eliminated years ago during the frozen nights of SBS selection, still wanted to believe. It was the ghost of the little girl who simply wanted her mother's approval. I agreed. The restaurant was precisely as I remembered, a low hum of powerful men discussing money, the clinking of heavy silverware against starched white linens, the rich fragrance of seared beef and expensive wine. Margaret was already seated at a premium booth. A glass of buttery Chardonnay rested in her hand. She did not embrace me. She offered an air kiss that landed vaguely near my ear. Her perfume, Chanel No. 5, enveloped me in a cloud of calculated elegance. For the first 30 minutes, she did not address the fraud. She performed a flawless monologue about Sophie's brilliant career prospects, about upcoming London charity season events, about destructive rumors circulating through the Hurlingham Club. It was masterclass avoidance, strategic deployment of trivialities designed to lower my defenses. Then, as the waiter cleared our untouched salad plates, she leaned forward. Her perfectly manicured hand covered mine on the linen tablecloth. Her touch was as cold as marble. Darling, she said, her eyes welling up with perfectly timed tears, your father made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. He admits this completely. But if you expose this, you will destroy everything. You will destroy Sophie. Her career will be over before it truly begins. Do you genuinely want your innocent sister to suffer because of your father's error? I pulled my hand back as if I had touched flame. The emotional blackmail was so transparent, so absolutely textbook. You are asking me to remain silent to protect a criminal? I asked. Tears streamed down her face now, perfectly contained, never threatening her immaculate makeup. I am asking you to be a daughter, she said, her voice rising with righteous indignation that was utterly manufactured. Your father raised you. He educated you. He provided everything. You owe him this. You chose your own life. You abandoned this family to play soldier. The very least you might do is consider us for once. And there it was, the pivot, the classic victim blame reversal. In her narrative, I was not the one whose identity had been stolen. I was not the one whose honor had been tarnished. I was the ungrateful child, the one who had abandoned them. My father's felony was merely a mistake. But my pursuit of justice was a malicious betrayal of family loyalty. The weight of responsibility, as always in the Morgan family, was being placed squarely on my shoulders. Did she genuinely believe her own words? Or was this simply another performance in a lifetime of manufactured emotions? Looking at her, I recognized with sudden, gut-wrenching clarity that it did not matter. The effect remained identical. I stood up. My movements were calm and entirely deliberate. I extracted 2 20-pound notes from my wallet and placed them on the table, considerably more than necessary to cover my modest lunch. I looked directly into my mother's tear-filled eyes. But for the first time, I felt absolutely no pain, no lingering sting from her disapproval. Only a profound, bottomless pity for this woman who valued appearances infinitely more than truth. I have already paid my debt to this family, Mum, I said, my voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. I paid it with my youth. I paid it with scars you shall never witness. I nearly paid it with my life. Multiple times. My account is settled. I let that statement hang in the air, permitting the finality to penetrate her understanding. I owe him only one thing now, a fair trial. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I left her there, a solitary tragic figure in her expensive dress. Her carefully constructed performance disintegrating around her amidst the clatter of silverware and the quiet murmur of accumulated power. It was a declaration of war. and I possessed absolute certainty that the enemy's next strike would not be so subtle. The morning after the disastrous lunch with my mother, my phone buzzed with a text from Whitfield. No message. Simply a link. My hand remained steady as I tapped it. The page loaded. Politico's daily bulletin. The newsletter that every politician, lobbyist, and power player in London reads whilst consuming their morning coffee. The headline was discreet yet absolutely devastating. A rift in a prominent London family. The article refrained from using our actual names. It did not require them. It spoke of a prominent investment banker on Canary Wharf and his daughter, a decorated but emotionally troubled military officer. It whispered of baseless accusations. It hinted that the daughter displayed signs of severe psychological distress following her years of military service. It did not explicitly reference post-traumatic stress, but the implication was a poisoned dart aimed with precision. He was attempting to discredit me by weaponizing my service. He was portraying me as a broken soldier, a psychologically unstable veteran attempting to extort her loving family. My father had launched his counteroffensive, and it was profoundly dirty. The rage that filled me was white hot. He had attacked the only thing I had constructed for myself, the only thing that belonged entirely to me. My honor as an officer, my reputation, my service record. As if on cue, frantic pounding erupted on my flat door. I wrenched it open to find Sophie standing there. Her face was tear-streaked. She clutched a printed copy of the article. "What have you done, Isabella?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You are destroying this family. Dad said you were unwell, that he was attempting to help you, and you do this." I looked at my sister, at her perfect, privileged world, a world constructed on a foundation of lies she had never been forced to confront, and something inside me finally fractured. The years of disciplined silence, of swallowing insults, of turning away from confrontation, it all shattered completely. "Help me?" The words emerged as a low growl, torn from a place of pure fury. "He is helping me by stealing my identity, by utilizing my name to conduct business with corrupt defense contractors. Your Oxford tuition, Sophie, that brand new Mercedes, this entire existence you believe you have earned, was financed with my honor. It was constructed on lies bearing my name." The color drained from her face. She stared at me as though observing a stranger. Not the quiet, awkward older sister, not the disappointing naval officer, but a stranger entirely. Someone radiating terrifying rage. She took a step backward, turned and fled. I slammed the door shut. My breath came in ragged gasps. My knuckles were white against the wood. That night, the anger gave way to crushing exhaustion. I sat on the floor of my darkened flat. The lights of London blinked indifferently beyond my window. I had confronted terrorists, warlords, pirates conducting maritime operations in extremely dangerous environments. I had endured suffering designed to break human beings, but absolutely nothing had prepared me for the sheer cruelty of my own family. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely alone. Cornered by an adversary I could not engage with weapons or military tactics. He was deploying his power, his influence, his lies. He was systematically erasing me. My mind drifted to a book my mentor, a wise and experienced Master Chief Petty Officer, had gifted me years ago. I retrieved it from the small shelf beside my bed and found the passage he had personally underlined. The words seemed to lift from the page. "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong stumble. The credit belongs to the man actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood." Something shifted inside me. A profound clarity cut through the despair. That was precisely what he was doing. My father was the critic on the sidelines, pointing and whispering, attempting to push me out of the arena because he was absolutely terrified of the woman I had become. He was afraid of any confrontation on equal terms. I stood up. The exhaustion was replaced by cold, energizing fury. I walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling lights of London. He would not prevail. He would not define me. I would step into that arena. Not as a victim, but as a warrior. I picked up my phone and called Catherine. "Catherine, cancel every negotiation," I said when she answered. My voice was terrifyingly calm. "We are proceeding to trial. I want to face him publicly. I want London to comprehend exactly what Thomas Morgan did." I took a steady breath. "I swear this to you. Catherine, this is not an emotional declaration. This is a binding promise." The actual war had commenced. My vow to Catherine was not an emotional outburst. It was a military directive. The moment I terminated the call, The rage transformed into familiar, focused calm. This was no longer a family drama. This was a precision operation. The objective was clear: dismantle my father's entire empire of fabricated truth. The instrument was irrefutable evidence. The timeline was absolute. I flew to Royal Marines Commando Training Centre at Lympstone in Devon. Stepping onto the base felt like returning home. The salty air, the sound of personnel conducting training exercises. It was the place where I genuinely belonged. But I was not there for comfort. I was there for ammunition. Commander Whitfield met me outside the administrative building. Together, we proceeded into the records archive, a secure, climate-controlled facility housing the complete documented history of my military career. I presented my credentials to the senior petty officer on duty. I require my complete deployment logs and all annual performance reports for the previous 10 years, I stated. The petty officer, a man with 30 years of service visible in his expression, regarded me with professional curiosity, but complied without question. He possessed no awareness that the bureaucratic documents he was retrieving would transform into devastating evidence in an entirely different conflict. Under harsh fluorescent lighting in a secure conference room, Whitfield and I arranged the files. A complete decade of my existence, reduced to dates, coordinates, and performance evaluations. Verified facts. Incontrovertible truth. We cross-referenced every fraudulent transaction Catherine had discovered. April 12, 2019. The £1.6 million credit line was authorised at a bank in Windsor. My performance report for that period stated: Commander Morgan conducted critical reconnaissance operations in the Indian Ocean sector. September 7, 2020. A brokerage account opened in my name in the Isle of Man. My deployment records confirmed. Engaged in joint training operations with British Special Forces, Scottish Highlands. One by one, every lie my father had constructed was obliterated against the granite wall of military documentation. There was cold, profound satisfaction in it. He had constructed his entire case on my absence, on the secrecy of my operational life. He never imagined that my secret existence was the most meticulously documented existence in existence. While I was accumulating irrefutable proof, Catherine was conducting her own offensive in London. She called me late one evening. Her voice was electric with discovery. I have identified another shell corporation, Isabella, Meridian Impact Limited, registered in the Isle of Man. The jurisdiction favoured when persons desire absolute corporate anonymity. What is the connection? I asked. It has been receiving consistent consulting payments from a subsidiary of Meridian Capital Holdings, and the sole managing member is your father, Thomas Morgan, she continued without pause. It becomes more severe. To establish the corporate bank account, he required a secondary identification document. He submitted a scanned copy of a passport bearing your name. I verified. You have never been to Birmingham except to change trains. The IP address that uploaded the document, Catherine stated, her voice grim, traces back to his office building in the financial district. He did not merely steal your identity, Isabella. He created an entirely separate identity, a ghost he could completely control. The final crucial piece arrived from Whitfield. He was reviewing archived communication logs when he recalled something. Years ago, Commander, he said, looking up from his laptop. Your life insurance policy. There was an issue regarding the beneficiary designation whilst you were deployed overseas. I was required to contact your emergency contact. He paused for emphasis. All communications involving sensitive personnel data are automatically recorded for security purposes. We can request the NCIS security recording through official channels. A few hours later, a secured audio file arrived in my secure email inbox. We listened in the quiet security facility. We heard Whitfield's younger voice. I require confirmation of some information regarding Commander Morgan's designated power of attorney. And then my father's voice. Smooth, confident, dripping with unmistakable condescension. This is Thomas Morgan. I am her designated power of attorney. You may speak with me directly. It was the sound of a bear trap snapping shut completely. An absolutely perfect sound. A cold smile touched my lips. The evidence was compiled, cross-referenced, meticulously verified. The lies, the forgeries, the sheer breathtaking arrogance of it all. It was there. A perfect, unbreakable chain of evidence. I looked at Whitfield. He simply nodded. He understood completely. We possess sufficient ammunition, Whitfield, I said, closing my laptop. Time to load the magazines and prepare for deployment. The hearing room for the civil court was a place deliberately designed to intimidate. Dark oak paneling, muted grey carpeting, profound silence presided over by 3 stone-faced judicial officers. The air felt cold and absolutely still. Thomas Morgan sat at the respondent's table, flanked by an expensive legal team. Their suits probably cost more than my monthly military salary. He appeared completely relaxed, confident, even bored. He was a shark in his natural environment, a master of a world governed by legal technicalities and plausible denial. He nodded politely to the judges, a man among his peers. Then the courtroom doors at the rear opened and I walked in. The quiet murmur died instantly. Every head rotated, every eye fixed on me. I was not wearing a business suit. I was not presenting as a civilian plaintiff. I was wearing my navy dress uniform, dark navy blue, formal high collar, adorned with every ribbon and medal I had earned over 12 years of service. The gold stripes of a commander shone on my sleeves. The SBS insignia, my most sacred symbol, was pinned directly over my heart. I was not a daughter suing her father. I was a commander in the Royal Navy reporting serious federal crimes. I observed a flicker of something in my father's expression. Not fear, not yet, but irritation, a crack in his carefully maintained composure. This was not the narrative he had orchestrated. I walked with steady, measured pace to the petitioner's table and took my seat beside Catherine. I did not look at him. I looked directly at the judicial panel. Catherine rose. She was an absolute force, calm and completely commanding. "Good morning, members of the bench," she began. "My client, Commander Isabella Morgan, is present today not to air a family disagreement, but to formally report a grave series of federal offenses that weaponized her military service and her identity directly against her." She commenced her presentation, a systematic, absolutely relentless barrage of facts. Each piece of evidence was a missile launched at my father's fortress of fabrication. First, a world map appeared on the large screen behind the judges. A red pin marked my location in the Indian Ocean. On April 12, 2019, Catherine stated, her voice absolutely sharp, when a £1.6 million line of credit was established in my client's name at a Windsor bank, Commander Morgan was here, conducting critical maritime security operations. Another pin appeared, Scottish Highlands. When a brokerage account was created in her name, she was here, conducting joint training with Allied forces. One by one, she presented the documents, the forged power of attorney, the corporate registration for Meridian Impact Limited, the counterfeit passport, its metadata revealing it was uploaded from an IP address, registered to Thomas Morgan's office building in London. The courtroom temperature seemed to drop. The silence grew heavier. I could sense my father's gaze upon me, but I maintained absolute focus on the evidence, on the cold, irrefutable truth being systematically dismantled before the judicial panel. Catherine reserved the most devastating evidence for final impact. The respondent has claimed through his legal representatives that these actions, whilst perhaps unconventional, were simply those of a concerned father attempting to safeguard his daughter's financial assets, whilst she served in dangerous locations abroad. She paused, permitting the absurdity to permeate the silence. She turned to look directly at Thomas Morgan. The question before this bench is straightforward. Safeguard them from what? Thomas's lead barrister, a man with silver hair and an expensive tan, stood abruptly. Objection! This constitutes speculation and conjecture. Sustained, the primary judge said, but his gaze remained fixed entirely on Catherine. Allow me to reframe, Catherine said smoothly. Let us examine what this protection genuinely entailed. Thomas stood. His expression was a meticulously crafted mask of wounded sincerity. He addressed the judges as though they were acquaintances at his country club. Gentlemen, my daughter, she selected a difficult, dangerous career path, a life I struggled to comprehend. I only endeavoured to guarantee she possessed a future to return to. If I was excessively vigilant, it was merely because of a father's complete love. That was my signal. I remained seated, but I rotated my body slightly to face him directly. When I spoke, my voice was not loud, but it cut through the courtroom's silence with surgical precision. My future? I asked, holding his gaze absolutely steady. You stole my present to enrich yourself. You utilized my name, the name I swore an oath, to defend and protect, to finance your own schemes. You did that without me, without my permission, without my knowledge. I leaned forward slightly. That does not make you my protector, Thomas. That makes you a thief." He actually flinched as if I had struck him physically, but Catherine was not finished. She had preserved the killing blow for final deployment. "One additional element of this protective strategy," she said, her voice dropping for maximum dramatic impact. She projected a new document onto the courtroom screen. It was paperwork for yet another secret investment account. This account was also opened in my name, but this one contained a crucial distinction. This account designates a sole beneficiary in the event something occurred to Commander Morgan during one of her dangerous overseas deployments, Catherine said. The document zoomed in on the beneficiary line. The name appeared in sharp, clear type T. Morgan. A collective sharp intake of breath went through the small audience section. I glanced backward. My mother's face had become completely white, a mask of pure horror, and Sophie. Sophie was staring at the screen, her entire body rigid. Her face had drained of all color. She resembled a porcelain doll, a perfect, fragile thing about to shatter, her perfect world, her belief in her golden status, her absolute faith in our father. It all disintegrated in that singular silent instant. She was not the valued asset. She was the exit strategy, the contingency plan, simply another pawn in his game. She rotated her head slowly, her wide, disbelieving eyes fixed directly on our father. Her lips parted, and a single, absolutely heartbroken whisper escaped, a sound that seemed to echo through the silent courtroom. "You used me." It was the final blow. Not from me, not from Catherine, but from his own favored child, the daughter he had always chosen, the daughter he had always protected. The lie had consumed everything, even its own creation, even the very person he had built it around. The facade of the powerful, loving father collapsed completely. It became dust, absolute dust. Thomas Morgan stared at Sophie. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His confidence, his arrogance, his entire curated identity evaporated like morning mist. He staggered backward, collapsing into his chair. He buried his face in his hands. A broken man. He had not been defeated by a team of expensive lawyers. He had been destroyed by a single, undeniable truth. The hearing adjourned, not with dramatic finality, but with the quiet, devastating collapse of a man who had believed himself invincible. There was an odd, hollow emptiness in the air as Catherine and I gathered our materials. The judges had retired. My father's legal team was engaged in hushed, urgent conversation, and my family remained a frozen tableau of shock at the courtroom's rear. Victory felt less like celebration and more like the profound bone-deep exhaustion following a particularly grueling military operation. As we were departing, my father intercepted me in the quiet, marble-floored corridor. The calculated confidence he wore like expensive tailoring was completely absent now, stripped away, leaving behind a desperate, hollowed man I barely recognized. His shoulders were slumped. His usually tan, healthy face had become pasty grey. "Isabella," he rasped, his voice raw and unfamiliar. "We can repair this, please. I will restore everything, every single pound. We can repair this." I looked at him, genuinely looked at him, and felt an absolute absence of emotion. Not the hatred I might have expected. Not the anger that had fueled me. Not even the satisfaction of victory. Just a vast, cold emptiness. Like a crater where a building had previously stood. "You cannot restore 12 years, Dad," I said. My voice even, and completely dispassionate. "You cannot restore the trust you obliterated. You cannot rehabilitate the honor you attempted to auction off to the highest bidder." My mother and Sophie stood at the far end of the corridor like statues in an abandoned museum. Unable to approach, unable to turn away. I kept my gaze locked entirely on him. "You taught me that everything is an investment, a cold calculation of profit and loss, that every relationship is a transaction, that family loyalty is merely currency to be deployed when convenient." I paused, permitting the weight of his own philosophy to settle between us. And today, I am cutting my losses. I walked past him. His hand twitched as if to reach out, but he did not. My footsteps echoed in the absolute silence. I did not look back. A week later, the official fallout commenced. Delivered with the cold, impersonal efficiency of government authority, the Crown Prosecution Service issued a formal statement. The words were clinical, brutal, absolutely public. Thomas Morgan has been indicted on charges of wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud Her Majesty's government. The news spread like wildfire through London's financial district. His assets were frozen by court order. His business partners abandoned him. The telephones at his firm ceased ringing entirely. The Morgan Empire, a monument to financial expertise, crumbled overnight. I observed the headlines on Bloomberg and the Financial Times, the very publications that had previously lauded his brilliance. Now they were dissecting his absolute downfall with detached journalistic satisfaction. Reading those words, I experienced no surge of triumph, simply profound, heavy relief. The sensation of a burden I had not fully recognized I was carrying, finally and irrevocably lifted from my shoulders. The personal fallout arrived via telephone days later. It was Sophie. Her voice was broken, choked with sobs that sounded raw and entirely new to her. "I resigned," she whispered. "Everyone at the firm looks at me as if I was complicit, as if I am a criminal." She was weeping now, the wrenching, helpless sobs of someone whose entire world had been pulverized. "I swear to you, Isabella, I swear on my life, I was unaware. I knew nothing. Nothing." I believed her completely. That was the true tragedy. I listened to her weep for a long moment. The sound scraped against my raw nerves. There was no room for false comfort. There was only truth. "I believe you, Sophie," I said, my voice gentle but absolutely firm. "But ignorance is not innocence. It is merely privilege. A privilege that was purchased with my truth." I allowed her to absorb that reality. The silence contained only her ragged breathing. "You must construct your own existence now, Sophie, from the absolute ground up, with your own hands. It is the only way, the only genuine path forward." I terminated the call. It felt cruel, like abandoning a soldier on a battlefield. But it was a necessary cruelty. It was the final, hardest lesson our family had to offer. You cannot construct a meaningful life on a foundation built from someone else's lies. That evening, back in the quiet, sterile atmosphere of my Richmond flat, the reality of my victory finally settled in, and it tasted like ashes. I sat in darkness for hours, simply observing the distant, indifferent lights of London. I had prevailed. I had exposed the complete truth. I had reclaimed my name. But in accomplishing this, I had methodically dismantled my own family. The demolition was absolute. Nothing remained except rubble. I remembered our team chaplain, a good man who had witnessed more than his share of fractured things. He was fond of quoting scripture, not to preach, but to locate anchors in the storm. A line came to me then, "From scripture, and you will comprehend the truth, and the truth will liberate you." I had discovered the truth, and I was, in a manner, liberated. Liberated from the crushing weight of their expectations, free from quiet shame, free from the suffocating web of fabrication. But as I sat there in the silence of that empty room, I recognized that freedom resembled loneliness profoundly. The battle to clear my name had concluded, but a new conflict, a quieter and far more difficult one, was only beginning. I had to discover how to live in this new unburdened silence. I had to determine what home and family genuinely signified now. When the old definitions had been completely incinerated, 6 months later, I stood in a location far removed from any courtroom or office environment. I stood in the Hall of Valour at the Ministry of Defence, a sacred space where the names of Britain's most courageous military personnel are recorded. The atmosphere felt different, hallowed, heavy with sacrifice and genuine honour. I was not wearing my formal dress uniform. At my personal request, I wore my desert operational fatigues, the sandy, worn combat uniform of a warrior in the field. This recognition was not for a commander at a desk. It was for an SBS operator in active theatre. The first Sea Lord stood before me. He read a citation for an act of valour that had remained classified until this precise moment. He described a critical mission in East Africa. Years ago, the very mission I had been conducting when my father was busy forging my signature on fraudulent documents. The details were sparse, necessarily so. But they conveyed the reality: a firefight, a wounded teammate, a decision executed under absolutely impossible circumstances, a decision that had saved lives. As he concluded, he extracted the Distinguished Service Order from its velvet presentation case and pinned it directly to my chest. The weight was modest, but its significance was immeasurable. Kamantor flashes erupted like distant gunfire. I observed the assembled group of dress uniforms and serious expressions. I located them. Whitfield, Catherine, several team members. They were not applauding loudly. They simply stood there, smiling. I was invited to address the assembly. I possessed no prepared remarks. I spoke directly from my core. I was taught. I began, my voice clear and steady, that a special operator is a quiet professional. That genuine honor is completing the mission with absolutely nobody ever knowing your designation. For a considerable time, I genuinely believed that was the sole truth. I paused, permitting the words to settle. But I have learned an alternative lesson. I have discovered that silence occasionally is not strength. Sometimes silence is complicity. Silence can obliterate the truth. Silence can obliterate a person. Silence can create space for lies to expand. My attention drifted to my teammates. They understood perfectly. Persons speak about family legacy, about names you inherit from previous generations. But I have come to comprehend that authentic legacy is not what is transferred to you. It is what you construct with your personal sweat and blood and tears. It is forged in the decisions you make in isolation, when absolutely nobody is watching. It is built through acts of integrity, when compromise would be substantially simpler. It is written through courage when fear would be totally justified. I looked back at the assembled crowd of military personnel and government officials. I stand here today not because I am perfect, but because I refuse to be obliterated. I refuse to disappear. I refuse to allow someone else to compose my narrative. I am not the daughter of an investment banker. I am not the family embarrassment or the failed investment. I am Commander Isabella Morgan, Royal Navy Special Warfare Command, and I have personally inscribed my own name in the permanent record. A wave of applause, strong and sustained, filled the entire hall. For the first time, it felt like it was genuinely for me, for the authentic me. Not the daughter they were ashamed of, not the disappointing sibling, but the officer I had actually become. Later that evening, I bypassed the formal reception. Instead, I assembled with my team at a small, unassuming veterans' public house in Clapham. The variety of establishment with faded regimental flags on the walls, the scent of spilled lager and ancient stories permeating the air. We crowded into a worn wooden booth. There was absolutely no discussion of the trial, no reference to Thomas Morgan. We simply consumed our pints of bitter, exchanged old operational stories, and laughed. The easy, unburdened laughter of brothers in arms, of sisters in arms, of soldiers bound by something far more profound than blood. I retrieved the small velvet case from my pocket and opened it. The Distinguished Service Order gleamed beneath the dim pub lighting. I did not preserve it. I did not place it in a protective glass display case destined for a wall. I positioned it gently on the worn surface of the wooden table, directly adjacent to a faded, dog-eared photograph of our team, captured in the desert sun following a particularly grueling operation. I observed the acquainted smiling faces in that image. The personnel who had distributed their final water rations with me, who had entrusted me with their very survival, my genuine family, the one that truly mattered. It was a profound realization. The entire journey had not simply been pursuing justice. It had been about discovering what genuinely held significance. It was not about validating my value to persons who would never acknowledge it. It was not about proving anything to individuals who had never believed in me. It was about honoring the genuine connections, the bonds forged through fire and sacrifice, the loyalty of those who had stood beside me when absolutely everyone else turned away, the trust of those who had selected me to command them, the brotherhood and sisterhood of warriors who comprehended that your word, your honor, your integrity were everything. The message of my own existence, I recognized, was profoundly straightforward. Never permit anyone else to hold the pen that writes your narrative. A genuine legacy is not the name you are given at birth. It is the name you personally construct through everything you do. It is written through your decisions. It is demonstrated through your actions. It is earned through your commitment to something larger than yourself. I consumed a long drink of my cold lager. The glass felt welcome in my hand, and for the first time in an extended period, I felt as though I was finally home. My journey to this instant, to this feeling of genuinely belonging, was fundamentally about discovering my authentic truth and my personal voice. And I comprehend I am not alone in this experience. Your own story possesses value. Your journey deserves to be heard. Your truth matters. Your experience is valid. If this narrative resonated with you, I genuinely invite you to share your own story. Tell me about your experience. Tell me about your journey. Let us construct a genuine community where every individual voice is genuinely honored and respected. And if you desire to listen to additional stories of authentic resilience and justice, I encourage you to subscribe to Hidden Family Infidelity and Revenge. Become part of our expanding community. Support independent storytelling that celebrates truth and honor, because every person deserves to compose their own narrative.